guys, my name's Marion. I'm a long-term resident in Rwanda, and something that I see go past on forums a lot are questions about how you go about house hunting when you get here. So how do you find a rental property? Now, it's a bit tricky. There are some things that you really need to know when you get here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a quick explanation of how the rental system works here and what you should kind of expect when you first get here. And then I'm going to give you 10 top tips or 10 questions that I would be asking if I'm going house hunting, things that you really need to know before you sign that contract. So let's get into it. Okay, so jumping straight in. If you're coming from, say, a Western country, an industrialized country, most of us are used to house hunting by either going to the website or the physical location of an estate agent's. When you get there, you'll see pictures on boards of all of the different houses and all of the different flats and apartments that are up for rent or for sale. And they usually have a lot of pictures of the inside that you can look at, and then they'll give you the price. And usually what happens is you tell the estate agent which ones you want to go and visit, and they'll take you to go and have a look. Or sometimes maybe there'll be an open day where a property's up for rent or sale and it's just open at a specific day and time, and anybody interested can turn up and have a look around. That isn't quite how it works here. First of all, you don't really have estate agencies where you can just walk in and look at the pictures and the prices. Things are getting a bit better. There are definitely now some online websites that you can visit that do have the pictures and do have the price listed. But the really big difference is that here you need to pay the estate agent to go and look at the houses. So it's kind of like a pay-per-view service. And I suppose one of the reasons for this is I'm not sure that they get commission from people selling the houses. So they're trying to make the money back by showing people the houses. Some of them might be getting the money for viewing the houses and some form of commission. It's all a bit complicated and not very clearly explained. But you do need to know that when you come here, first of all, it's quite difficult to find out all of the properties that are available because, you know, most places don't have these boards and these shops that you can go and visit and look at the pictures. And the online listings can sometimes be a bit out of date. It can be a little unclear where the houses are and some of the details involved. But also, you know, you have to arrange to go and meet the estate agent at these properties, and then you have to pay them for showing you. So you need to expect or to budget for the viewing fees. It's usually not very much. It's usually the cost of the transport and then a little bit extra. I haven't done this for many years, so I don't actually know what the going rate is at the moment. I've lived all over the city. I've lived in Kisimente, I've lived in Kanombe, I've lived in Gikondo twice, Kachiru, and in between that I've been to visit lots of other houses whilst I was hunting. And it can be quite difficult because when you're paying to view the houses, there's an incentive there for the estate agent to show you a few other houses that aren't really what you're asking for. So it's quite common to send a list like, this is my budget, these are how many bedrooms, this is what I want, this is the kind of location I want. But because you're paying per house that you view, you often get a few others thrown in there that aren't really what you were looking for. So really the best advice I can give you is if you're thinking of moving to Rwanda, book yourself into an Airbnb or book yourself into an affordable guest house and start the house hunting once you get here. Because it definitely isn't always guaranteed that what is listed is what you're actually going to get. And I think you really open yourself up for a lot of complications if you just dive in to rent a property before you've properly looked at it and explored other options. So definitely book yourself in to an Airbnb or a cozy guest house and probably plan to spend a couple of months there whilst you're house hunting, because it can take a while to get out to see these different properties and to compare the rent and to find an estate agent that you trust and you're happy with. So That would be my top tip. Okay, so jumping in with the top questions that I would have if I was renting. The first one I'm going to put in there is, are there any other hidden costs? So, as in most countries in the world, if you're moving into somewhere for the first time, you're likely going to have to pay a deposit, and you're likely going to have to pay at least 2, sometimes 3 months rent up front. So obviously you're going to ask about that. But then you're also going to want to ask about water, electricity, and rubbish disposal. So water is usually on a water meter, and there's usually a water meter somewhere in your compound or your neighbour's compound. Electricity is usually bought on a meter, and you can do that using mobile money on your phone, or you can go to a vendor and buy it. And the last one is rubbish collection, which is usually 1 day a week. So you need to find out when that is. And you just put your rubbish outside the gate for collection. But it sometimes works differently in different areas. Traditionally, there have been different companies that come and do that. Now I think the government is trying to regulate that into a national disposal system. But you need to find out when it is, where you put your rubbish, and how much you need to pay for that on a monthly basis. It's usually very, very cheap. So we're talking like a few £1,000 a month. So usually the electricity, you're likely to have to go and buy that yourself or do that on your phone. And then of course you're controlling how much you're spending each month on electricity because you're buying it and you enter it onto the meter in your compound. The water, somebody usually comes around once a month from WASAC, which is the water company, and they'll take a reading from your meter and then they'll give you a bill. And the disposal you usually pay to your local community. It can vary very much throughout the city. I'm not sure if it's your Umadugudu or somebody else. The reason I don't know this is because I have an agreement with my landlord that I include money for water and rubbish disposal in my monthly rent. And he takes that money and he pays for those services for me out of my rent. So that's included in my rent. The only thing that I add on top of that is the electricity, which I buy myself. But of course, if you're moving in somewhere, you need to ask these questions, and not only ask them, but get it written into the contract so that there's no confusion later on down the line. Number 2, the amenities. And by that I mean, how reliable is the water and the electricity? Because in Kigali still, we do have electricity cuts, power outs, and we do have water outs. How frequently can depend very much on where you're living. The frequency of that is entirely geographical. So for example, I currently live in Kachiru and I have power outs and water outs quite rarely most of the time. But when I used to live in Kanombe, I never had water. I had to have it delivered by jerry can. So you can be walking around a beautiful house, like my house in Kanombe that never had water, had 2 beautiful bathrooms, tiled with a bath and a shower, looked beautiful, but I would never be able to use those. So when you go to view the house, play with it, turn the lights on and off, turn the water on and off, see if the electricity in the water's working. If you can, ask somebody else who lives there in the same building or next door whether or not their water and electricity is reliable. You might not always get an honest answer from the person who is showing you the house because, you know, obviously they want you to rent it. They might not be upfront about it. But it is worth just checking the area and how happy other residents are with their water and electricity provision. Now, if you absolutely love the house and the electricity isn't reliable, you could invest in a generator. That's going to be an additional cost that you'd have to factor in. And if the water is not reliable, you can buy a water tank. And so when the water comes on, the water tank fills up, and then you use that water when the water isn't working. A friend of mine also, during the rainy season, has a pipe system that fills up buckets of water to use for laundry and the toilet and things like that. But even if you're moving into a house that has got pretty regular electricity and water, you always need to plan for the fact that you will have an outage at some point. So you always need to keep an emergency bucket of water just for those days when you really want to flush the loo and take a bucket bath. And also maybe invest in some battery packs for your laptop and your phone. Number 3, a really important one. If you want fibre optic internet, so really decent Wi-Fi, you're going to need to make sure that your house is somewhere connected to the Wi-Fi grid and that can actually be channeled into your home, because not everywhere currently is. And if it isn't, you're going to be relying on sort of a little SIM card e-router for your house, which is probably not going to be enough for what you need. So the 2 major fibre optic providers at the moment are Canal Box and Liquid. Most people opt for Canal Box because they offer really straightforward monthly packages that you can just renew online, and it's quite easy to get yourself connected to that. I will leave the link below. There is also Starlink, for which you do not need the fibre optic cables. So if you're not connected to Liquid or Canal Box, you can still get Starlink. Morally and economically, it's up to you if you want to go with that, but it does exist. So if you're interested in fibre optic, it's worth checking out whether or not the house is already connected, and if not, whether or not it can be. Next up, we've got access. So what I mean by that is basically, what is the state of the road? And that might sound like a strange thing to ask, but don't forget that for several months a year here, you get downpours. You get really heavy downpours, and especially if you're on a mudam road, so a mud road, that can get really rocky really quickly. Sometimes you can get big channels that are kind of formed during the rainy season. I've seen roads that are even worse than that. I've seen roads that have got flagstones jutting up at angles. So really difficult roads to pass if you have mobility issues, and probably not great on the tyres of your car long term. So if you're driving a car or you've got a motorbike, you need to ask yourself, can I easily get in and out of this road? And is there an appropriate parking spot for me? And also, because when you move in, you might want to order something like Vuba Vuba, which is food delivery. That's like our version of Uber Eats. And, you know, you might want to get your post delivered from the post office. So when you're looking at the road, ask yourself, can I get in and out of it easily on the transport that I have? And, you know, could a moto delivery driver get there easily as well? Because that might make a difference to your quality of life later down the line. And if you don't have your own car or your own motorbike at the moment, look around as well and see whether or not there are any public motorbikes nearby. Often you'll find streets where motos will congregate nearby, and if you see that, then you know that if you need to go into town or you need to go and do something, you can easily get a public moto, or a bus if you prefer buses. Look for local bus stops. Because something that you want to avoid is ending up in a nice cheap house, but it's down a really long, muddy, poorly maintained road, and there aren't any motos going by, so you're going to have to walk for a significant distance every time you want to leave the house. That's not a good situation to be in. So the closer to the main road that you get, often the more expensive the houses will become, but also the more convenient. So it's finding that balance between how far from the main road you're willing to go, and whether or not you can still get to where you need to go. So next up is security. Now, if you're moving into an apartment building or a gated community, then security will usually be provided for you. There will be security guards who oversee the parking and the security of the building. Now, you want to know, as with hidden costs, whether or not the price of security is included in the rental price, or whether or not there's an additional fee that you need to pay either to your landlord or to the local security team who patrol your area. So at night time, pretty much every single area, every umudugudu, which means village, in Kigali, you will see local community police or local community security groups patrolling the area and making sure that things are calm and peaceful. And sometimes you are asked to make a contribution locally to that, and sometimes, as with my landlord, they'll include that in the amount that I'm paying, and that will get paid and I don't have to deal with it. So again, you need to find out if that's one of the hidden costs or whether or not that's already covered. And you do want to make sure that there is some form of security going on in your local area. And it's a good idea to get the name and, you know, the location of the local security office, because in the future, if you're worried about something, or you've seen strange people hanging around, or, you know, you just want to ask a security question, you can go and ask there. And usually local security are quite helpful and quite friendly. Now, it's definitely very traditional, both for foreigners and for locals, that if you're moving into a house, you usually have some form of staff moving in with you, and often a security guard. And sometimes your security guard also does odd jobs at the same time. It's not mandatory. Not everybody who moves here decides to have a living guard. Sometimes people just employ a night guard to come. But if you're going to do that, you also want to make sure that there's a little guard hut or somewhere that the guard can sit whilst they are guarding. You know, if you've got a living guard or live-in assistants, and then you want to maybe have a little hut with a little bathroom or a toilet and a bedroom and somewhere for that person to stay. At night times, you probably just want a little room where they can stay and where they can also observe what's going on in the compound. So it's up to you whether or not you have a living guard, whether or not you have a night guard, or whether or not you have no guard at all. Completely up to you. But if you have got a guard or any other form of staff, just make sure that there is somewhere that they can be comfortably on the property. Okay, number 6, and this one to me, this is probably my number one, because I have had so many problems with noise, and so many people living here have so many problems with noise. There are technically zoning regulations throughout Kigali. It's worth checking whether or not the area that you're moving into is considered residential or not. But even in residential areas, you're still going to get bars. You're still going to get like small businesses, workshops. It gets a bit crazy. And the other thing is that in Rwanda, we have a lot of audio issues in that, like, your house can be on this hill over here, and there can be a huge valley, and there can be another hill on the other side. Like where I live, I'm over here and Nyarutarama is over there. So 2 separate villages. But if there's a bar on a hill over there, the noise will come straight across and into your house. And also houses here, they often have ventilation blocks. So they have holes from the inside of your house to the outside of the house, and no double glazing, so you've got no protection against that noise. So a club can be going like 1-2 o'clock in the morning, and that noise will come straight across the valley and into your house. Or there can be a house at the bottom of the valley, and the whole valley becomes like an amphitheatre, just echoing that noise up to your house. Bars are a huge thing here. You can move in somewhere and the next week a bar opens, and it's tough. You also want to look around for schools. So you want to do a thorough check of your area for bars, schools, businesses. My advice is go and have a look at a house. If you really like it, just drive past it like a couple of nights. Just sit there for a couple of nights and just check what the levels of noise are. Go during the week, go on a weekend. You just want to check that, because once you move in, there's nothing you can really do about those noise issues. So do that. And also, if you're asking people about the water and electricity, Also ask them about the noise, ask them if they're getting a good night's sleep, because that can really affect your quality of life. So yeah, noise, be really aware, survey the area, and not just your immediate street, but the streets around it and the hills opposite before you move in. Right, moving into more familiar territory, notice periods. Something that you would check on any contract, no matter where you're signing it, is if you do need to move out quickly, how much notice do you need to give and how much rent? And similarly, check on their side. Can they just kick you out with a week's notice, or do they have to give you several weeks' notice? Most contracts will stipulate that you will get your deposit back when you leave, providing nothing is damaged. It is, in reality, extremely rare for that ever to happen. And of course, your estate agent isn't really mediating between you and the landlord. Once you've moved in, that's pretty much where an estate agent's job finishes. So any discussions then go on with the landlord, and usually the payment of the deposit and the rent is made directly to them. So you've really got no way of claiming that back. I would just write that off most of the time as gone money. Sometimes people get shocked, they're moving out and their landlord will offer them the money back. I think once in a blue moon. I really wouldn't expect it. So yeah, just before signing that contract, ask yourself, in an emergency situation, how much time do I have to pack up my bags and look for somewhere else to live? And bearing in mind, as I said, finding somewhere suitable to live can take a really long time. So it might be that you'd have to move back into an Airbnb or a guest house whilst you went through the house hunting process again. So by making changes, I mean, if you're moving in and you want to hang a picture on the wall or you want to change the furniture, are you allowed to do that? Again, this is a really common question in contracts in any country in the world. Now, most landlords here tend to be pretty reticent about allowing changes to the house. Obviously, if you've moved into an unfurnished place, then you're free to bring your own furniture. But if you move in somewhere and it's furnished, but you want to change some of the furniture, or you want to hang things on the wall, it varies landlord to landlord, but often you're going to get a no. You're going to often get a no until you've been there for several months, maybe struck up a bit of a friendship with your landlord, and they've trusted you not to burn down the house. One of the biggest things that happened to me when I moved into my current house was that I don't have an indoor kitchen. In a lot of older or more traditional houses in Rwanda, people would cook outside in the yard. But of course, being a Mzungu, I'm used to cooking indoors, but I didn't have an indoor kitchen. So I brought my gas hob and my gas bottle indoors, and I cook on a table in my kitchen area, or what I call my kitchen area. And for the first at least couple of years, my landlord was not happy about this at all. He was very worried that I would stink up the whole house, that the ceiling would be blackened, because people often cook with charcoal here, and when you're cooking, you cook beans and you cook things that take hours to prepare. So he was very worried about that, whereas me, again, being a Mzungu, I'm just frying an egg. It doesn't make a big difference. But I'd say after about 3 or 4 years, he just totally went, oh yeah, no, it's fine. I see now why you do that. That's very convenient. So he went from being very worried about it to being like, oh yeah, no, that's great. She hasn't burnt down the house, and the walls aren't stained with food. So sometimes it can take a bit of time to build up trust. So yeah, I just say, when you're looking at a property for the first time, consider in your mind what you might want to change, and perhaps have that little question before you sign the contract is, oh right, if I wanted to put up pictures, would that be okay or not? And you're going to gauge sort of how warm or cold they are towards that idea. Okay, leading on from that previous question about making changes, the next part is what happens if anything breaks? Again, this is fairly standard contract stuff that goes into most housing contracts in the world, but you do just want to check that. I mean, obviously, if you break something, then you're going to pay to repair it. But if it's just general wear and tear, like say the shower packs up, you do kind of want to gauge how likely or not your landlord or the manager of the property is to help you out there. So coming from many Western countries, landlords have specific responsibilities that if certain things break, like a fridge or, you know, the shower, they are going to pay to repair it to make the house suitably habitable for you. But it is kind of known here that sometimes you'll go, yeah, sure, we'll pay for that. We'll fix anything that's broken. And then when something breaks, you then get a bill for the replacement item and the labour. You know, that's not unheard of. So you want to kind of judge it. You could maybe ask something like, oh, you know, so if the shower breaks, who's responsible for replacing that? And then if they say, oh yeah, we are, and you say, so you pay for that. And if they say, yeah, then you just make sure that it's written in the contract somewhere quite clearly, because otherwise there's a lot of wiggle room goes on there. I mean, obviously, if you're the one who broke it, then it's reasonable that you would fix it and replace it. But if it is just wear and tear, or the item got really old and it just stopped working, then that's really a landlord thing. So another really important part to this is that if you found the house that you like and you're ready to sign the contract and move in, you need to go there and you need to take photographs of every piece of furniture and every light fitting and every item in each room, and then print that out and go through with the house manager or your landlord and sign and date, both of you sign and date, every page of that inventory. And then you both keep a copy. So if at the end of your tenancy you do want to dispute the deposit, that you can prove the condition that everything was in when you moved in. So if something was broken when you moved in, you have evidence of that. If a wall was stained when you move in, you have evidence of that to prove that you're not the one who did that. You know, to have a little bit of agreement there about the state that everything was in when you moved in. And here that is a really, really important thing to do. Okay, so number 10, the final tip is when you've found your perfect home and you're ready to sign that contract, make sure that on the contract it lists your full address. Now, this might sound a bit weird, but addresses here can be really complicated. So there's no postcode or zip code because there is no door-to-door mail delivery. Instead, you get district, sector, cell, and village. Now, most people know their district, like, do you live in Kichikiru or Kachiru or Gasabo? You know, most people will know that, but when you start to get down the list and you get to cell level, most foreigners don't have a clue. And later down the line, you know, you might be signing up for a bank account or a SIM card, or you might be opening a business and you might need to know what your address is. So to have it written on the top of your contract is a really smart move, because then you can just take a photograph and you know where you live. And it's a really good idea to have that. And the second thing that I was going to say about that is also your landlord or the house manager. It's a good idea to take a photograph of their ID card, and don't feel weird about asking this, because there's a likelihood that they're going to want a photocopy of your passport or your ID, and in return you should get theirs. So everybody in Rwanda has got a national ID card with their photograph and their name, and it's just a good idea to take a copy of that, just so that you always have evidence of the person that you entered into the contract with, just in case in the future, God forbid, there's ever any dispute. At least you know who you're supposed to be dealing with. So those are my top 10 questions, the top 10 tips that I would want to know if I was going house hunting today. Thankfully, I'm not. I'm now going to go and make a cup of tea instead. But I hope this has been helpful. And if I've missed anything out, or you've got any other tips that you think house hunters or potential house hunters should definitely ask, leave it below. And hopefully that will help people in the future. If this video has helped you, please do consider a like and subscribe because it really helps the channel to grow. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.